Hey YouTube, Joe Walker here at Def Digits Guitar Lessons. I've got a lesson today for my student Bernhard, who is just starting to study Cissy Strut. And he's got a handle on the riff, I think. I showed it to him last time. But today I want to talk about using some minor pentatonic shapes to solo over the song, or maybe even just to find other ways of playing the melody or harmonizing the melody. So I want to look at this start with this shape right here. That's going to be our shape that we kind of move around the fretboard and find different ways of doing that. So this is your root, C. It's important to know where all of your C's are so that you can find your root in whatever position you're in. And whenever we play the roots as we're doing this, I think we're always going to use the third finger. For now, use your third finger for all your roots, because when we're in this kind of funky sound, we're going to need that a lot. We're going to need to go down to the flat 7 a lot. So if your other root is here, so don't go playing your roots with your first finger thinking you're about to use your other fingers up here. Try to give yourself this other perspective on it, because we're going to use that lower note underneath the root quite a lot. So that's the root down to the flat 7 and back. Then we're going to go up to the flat 3 over here. If you're used to playing your minor pentatonics, starting them like that with first finger and pinky to get the 1 and the flat 3, don't do that for now. We're going to shift that note over here, first fret on the D string. So that's 1, flat 3. Your 4 is on the 3rd fret again. Your 5 is up there on the 5th fret. And that's where we're going to have to move. We've got 3 notes on that D string, the flat 3, the 4, and the 5, so we'll have to move somehow. You can go first finger, 3rd finger, and then slide, or pick all 3 notes, or you can move your first finger like that. Slide your first finger from the flat 3 to the 4, and then 3rd finger on the 5. Depends on what you're playing. So try to get comfortable sliding both of those fingers, because you'll have to get all 3 of those notes in that same string as we're using this shape. And then on the G string, we get flat 7 and 1 again. Those are the same 2 notes we had down here. So try to make those synonymous in your hands and in your brain. That's your root, that's a flat 7 underneath it. So if you play some little line here, like that should work the same way down here. And it should work everywhere that you have a root on the guitar, and you should be able to play that same pattern. So you might find another root up here, 8th fret on the high E string. Don't play it with your first finger, because then you can't play that same shape again. We get this. Play it with your 3rd finger, so you can play those same little melodies, and we're going to use that a lot. So now this shape that we have has the root down here. We also have 1 note under the root. So to play this kind of mini scale, play it like that. You start on your low root, you go down to the flat 7, then up through all the notes, up to the high root, and then descend through everything down to your flat 7, and then back to the low root. And that's just a little way you can take yourself through it to demonstrate to your fingers and to your ear how this should feel and how it should sound. So you do that here, then do the same thing starting on this root. It's the same note. These will all be the same notes, but now on new strings. So we're on the 8th fret of the low E string. So go through the same little process of So now let's take those 2 places and try them over a backing track for Cissy Strut, or just put the actual song on and play over that. That works just fine. So this is just a quick backing track I found on YouTube. You can go. And then just mess around with the notes and those shapes and try to make up some ideas. And then move over here, same set of notes, but different place on the fretboard. So just take yourself through some ideas like that, whatever you can come up with when you're improvising just with that small set of notes. I think it's, what is it, 6 notes? Yeah. So those two shapes are identical. Now we're going to move those shapes around to other strings to help us connect some of the pentatonic shapes that you know better. So if I told you play C minor pentatonic, most people probably go right here, 8th fret, and do this, right? So we want to take advantage of that. We want to get out of that box, but also take advantage of that box that you know really well and try to integrate it with everything else. So if we have some of these other ideas that might overlap with that, then we can try to make your box bigger, make your comfort zone bigger. So that last one we just did, this one, overlaps with this big box. So anything that you know up in that main primary pentatonic box, you can integrate with this little shape that we're adding on to the bottom of it. So now let's put that shape in a new place. Let's start with this root right here on the D string, 10th fret. So again, you're going to use 3rd finger so that we can get that action. You're going to go root, flat 3, 4, 5, just as we did before. But now when we go over to the D string, we have our tuning trap, so it's not going to be the same shape. We have fret 11 and fret 13 for our flat 7 and root at the top. So let's try to give that the same little exercise that we did to introduce it. And it will take a little bit different muscle memory. 1, because it's on different strings. 2, it's on higher frets that are closer together. 3, you have that little spot right there where your fingers might be crunched close together in order to make this happen. It's a different shape when you move from the G string to the B string. But you have to try to make it synonymous with those other things. So if you have an idea down here that goes, you should be able to execute the same thing up here. I don't know if I even did it exactly the same way. But you should be able to navigate these notes up here the same way that you navigate the notes down here and down here. Try to make them synonyms with each other in the way it feels and the way it sounds. Next, let's look at how that integrates with the big shape that you know really well. So in this big shape, sometimes it's really common to move up to the next position. Some people call this the BB box because BB King would do his kind of stuff up here in this box quite a bit. So that's exactly what this shape is doing. This little diagonal shape that I just introduced is going up into the next shape of the pentatonic scale. Using some of the notes from Old Faithful, that's what I call the primary box that everyone knows, and then moving up into a few of the notes of the next box higher. Now let's give it the same treatment, starting from this root again on the G string. We've seen this root before, but it was at the top of this shape, like that. Now we're going to make this the bottom of the new shape. We're going to go. So now we've got 1, flat 7, 1. Flat 3 is on the 4th fret of the B string. 4 is on the 6th fret. 5 is on the 8th fret. And then at the top, we've got our flat 7 and 1 at the top. So every time you do this, try to keep in mind where are your roots, and then secondarily, where are all the notes between the roots? Because we have a root near the bottom, we have a root up here at the top. So if you know where your C's are, C, 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 if you know where all of those C's are, then you can keep track of these two while you're playing in this area. So make sure that you've got this in your mind and this in your mind as your destination up here. So you can fill in the gaps as you're getting up closer to play those final few notes. You know that this C is your destination. So you can also know that that flat 7 is going to come right before it, and this 5 is going to be right below it on the same fret, 1 string lower. And the 4 is going to be right down there, 2 frets lower than 5. So that shape right there, 4 5 flat 7 1, should be familiar from these other ones because we've seen it 4 5 flat 7 1 over here, and we've seen it over here as well. So different parts of this shape might be familiar from other places, and other parts might not, but this is the work that you have to do, is try to make them all familiar. So I think that's the last little shape that we see of this. And now this is starting to integrate this shape, if you know it. C minor pentatonic, you might know this one somewhat well. So we're using some of the notes from this shape, and then some of the notes from the next shape, which would be this one. So as we play all these little diagonal ideas, we're not necessarily thinking of what's the entire shape, pentatonic shape that we're drawing from. We don't need that. All we need is the roots, and we need to know what the notes are around them. We need to know the root, where the flat 7 is, where the 5 is, where the 4 is, where the flat 3 is, and that's it. And that's the essence of playing pentatonic scales. Those are the only notes you need in order to play any of these bigger shapes. If you want to do this one, it's 1, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 7, 1, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 7, 1. It's a lot to keep track of when you're playing the entire shape, though. As you're really playing solos and you're really playing ideas, it's more useful to keep track of what's the small area of the fretboard that I'm in. There's my root, what are the notes in between them? And then you don't have to think about what's the entire shape this way or the entire shape that way. So that gives you, to recap here, I think 1, 2, 3, 4 different places to practice improvising and playing pentatonic ideas. One is starting at this root. Next is starting here. Next is starting here. Next is starting here. So I will play you out with that backing track again and try to integrate some ideas between all 4 of those places. Okay, so that's not the end of the story for Cissy Strut. There's some other stuff you can do in there. You can throw that major in there, and that will be for next time. Thanks for watching. See you later.